It is 2 p.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gon-young. You're watching ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. Now, Seoul's defense ministry lashed out at Pyongyang for its Tuesday's missile launch, which is being seen as a sign of its apparent protest against an ongoing series of annual military drills by South Korea and the U.S. ARIRANG News Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin has our top story.
South Korea's defense ministry said Wednesday that the previous day's rocket launches were a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, as the North did not notify anyone of the event in advance, and the missiles jeopardized a commercial Chinese airliner flying through North Korean airspace.
This is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and it has threatened the safety of a commercial airliner. Pyongyang should stop its provocations and abide by international standards.
The Defense Ministry spokesperson Kim Min-seok labeled the launches as explicit acts of aggression against a series of ongoing military exercises by South Korea and the U.S., adding that Seoul is keeping a close watch on the possibility of additional provocations to come. The missiles were short-range KN-02 ballistic missiles, and military sources in South Korea said Wednesday the North has around 100 of the missiles in its arsenal. The missiles can load up to 400 kilograms of explosives and chemical weapons, and dozens of missiles can be launched in minutes. The KN-02 has a maximum range of 170 kilometers and can hit a target at that distance in less than 4 minutes, posing a huge threat to the Seoul metropolitan area. It is thought that 30 KN-02 missiles are mounted on mobile launch pads and have Seoul in their crosshairs. North Korea has recently developed a multiple rocket launcher called the KN-09, which is presumed to have a target distance of 200 kilometers. That means that missiles shot from the border could reach Kerry, where the joint military bases of South Korea's Army, Air Force, and Navy headquarters are located. The Pentagon said Tuesday in its latest strategy document that North Korea poses a growing threat to the United States because of its pursuit of long-range missiles and nuclear weapons development. The U.S. Defense Department said the U.S. military will keep up its investment in missile defense while maintaining a major presence in the region. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Seoul's Unification Ministry sent a written proposal to Pyongyang earlier this Wednesday suggesting that the two Koreas hold talks to arrange regular reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Deputy spokesperson Park Soo-jin said the ministry proposed holding a round of working-level Red Cross talks next Wednesday on the South Korean side of Panmunjom, the inter-Korean security zone that's located at the border between the two Koreas. Now, the move follows President Park Geun-hye's recent call for regular family reunions during a speech at a ceremony commemorating Korea's Independence Movement Day on March 1st. The last round of reunions was held 2 weeks ago for the first in 3 years. Meanwhile, South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will address the UN Human Rights Council later this afternoon to raise the issue of the so-called comfort women, or women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. Now, Seoul's Foreign Ministry said Minister Yoon will give a speech in Geneva and call on Japan to compensate the victims of its wartime sexual slavery. This is the first time since 2006 that Seoul's top diplomat will attend a UN Human Rights Council session. And the comfort women issue has strained relations between Korea and Japan as high-profile Japanese politicians have continued to deny the wartime atrocities committed during its imperialist past. The U.S. has called on Korea and Japan to work towards easing tensions, emphasizing that the conflict should not become a threat to the stability in Northeast Asia. Now, the call comes as historical disputes has hit another rough patch in recent days. Our UDN reports.
Washington's top diplomat for East Asia has called on Korea and Japan to improve ties in response to concerns about the deteriorating relations between its allies in Northeast Asia. Speaking at a congressional hearing on Tuesday, Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia Daniel Russell said there is an urgent need to show prudence and restraint in dealing with difficult historical issues, and added that the issues must be handled in a way that promotes healing. He went on to emphasize that strategic cooperation between the U.S., Japan, and Korea is essential for the future security of Northeast Asia, especially in the face of nuclear threats from North Korea and other regional threats, an apparent reference to concerns surrounding a more assertive China. Russell's comments come amid Tokyo's continued denials of its past wrongdoing. About 500 nationalists, including high-level politicians, held a rally in Tokyo earlier this week, calling for a revision of a 1993 apology for the Japanese military's program of sexual slavery during World War II. Senior Vice Minister of Education Yoshitaka Sakurada charged that all historical facts with regard to Japan's program of sexual slavery have been fabricated. This has prompted Korea's foreign ministry to fire back that history and the surviving victims show who is actually lying about the truth. 유리안, 아리랑 뉴스.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gong-yong. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Now, Russia has successfully test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. The test, which the U.S. says it was well aware of in advance, adds an extra element to the ongoing tension over Ukraine. Park Ji-won has more.
Amid the tentative situation in Ukraine, Russia's defense ministry confirmed late Tuesday that it had test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile earlier in the day. The ministry says the RS-12M Topol missile, launched from near the Caspian Sea, successfully landed its target in a remote area of Kazakhstan. The test was planned before the current crisis in Ukraine, and the U.S. was notified before the test. However, it adds to the undercurrent of tension between Ukraine and Russia. In a press conference with reporters Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said what happened in Kiev was unconstitutional overthrow, and his country has the right to use all means to protect its nationals under the current Ukrainian government, which he says is illegitimate.
If we see lawlessness starting in the eastern regions too, if people ask us for help, and we have already an official address from the current legitimate president, we reserve the right to use all options at our disposal to protect those citizens.
However, he stressed the use of military force would be the last resort in dealing with the crisis.
What can be a reason to use the armed forces? This is, of course, the last resort. Simply the last resort.
He added he had no reason to purposely harm Russia's brotherly neighboring country. Putin called the leaders of the U.S. and other Western powers hypocritical in their condemnations, specifically mentioning the United States' interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, where he said Washington either acted without UN backing or completely distorted the content of UN resolutions. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And the United States is making efforts to ease the crisis in Ukraine. While U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Kiev on Tuesday, and he urged Moscow to stop threatening Ukraine and offered the new Ukrainian government some financial aid. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Kiev Tuesday with an aim to build a relationship with the country's new leadership and show Ukrainian citizens his support. He also accused Russia of an act of aggression in Crimea, but said he is not looking for a confrontation.
In the streets today, I didn't see anybody who feels threatened, except for the potential of an invasion by Russia. So I would hope that President Putin, who is insisting against all evidence everywhere in the world about troops being in Crimea, that they're not there, that he will step back and listen carefully, that we would like to see this de-escalated.
In Washington, President Barack Obama dismissed Russia's President Vladimir Putin's justifications for the military forces on standby and said they were a pretext to invade further in Ukraine. Back in Kiev, Kerry offered an economic and technical loan package worth $1 billion to assist Ukraine's new government. The package requires congressional approval for implementation. The United States also plans to send technical advisors to Ukraine to get the country's economy back on track. John Kerry's visit to Ukraine did not last long, and afterward he flew to Paris for a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the first between the two since the unrest in Ukraine erupted. Russia had declined an invitation for a meeting between Ukrainian and Russian officials at the same venue. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Now, Koreans who are raised or even born and raised in a country outside of Korea are commonly referred to as gyopos here in Korea. And the number of them returning to make a life for themselves in their homeland is increasing by the year. Now, in fact, recent data shows gyopos now make up nearly 15% of all foreigners in Korea. Connie Lee has more.
Bien Ho Jian, or Pyongyang as she's known here in Korea, is receiving her scholarship to study in Korea. She's a Korean Chinese who came from China just 7 months ago.
I'll be studying law at Seoul University.
The scholarship given by the Overseas Korea Foundation to dozens of foreign nationals of Korean descent not only gave Bien a chance to come to Korea for the first time in her life, it also gave her better opportunities to study in her field of choice.
I found that there are more advanced and developed courses in the area of law that I wanted to study here in Korea than in China.
And she's not the only one making the move to the motherland. According to recent data from the Ministry of Justice, the number of foreign nationals of Korean ethnicity surpassed the 200,000 mark for the first time last year. That's a 24% increase from the year before.
The record number comes from the increasing number of Korean Chinese citizens coming to Korea. In 2008, immigration laws were amended to give Korean Chinese citizens living here similar benefits to Korean citizens, including being allowed to own property and have health insurance.
In 2013, more than 67% were Korean Chinese. The second and third largest group were the Korean Americans, making up 19%, and the Korean Canadians, who made up nearly 6%. And for the most part, many come to Korea for the jobs.
There's definitely greater interest among overseas Koreans to live in Korea because Korea has become globalized with many new employment opportunities.
And taking advantage of opportunities is what one Korean American is doing. 31-year-old Kenny Park uses American influences and Korean ethnic background to start a Mexican fusion restaurant in Seoul.
Growing up in California, we just have a really vast array of food that's available to us. But when that Korean taco truck trend started to really boom, I kind of woke up one day and was like, hey, why don't we introduce this Korean taco trend in Korea as opposed to, doing it in America.
The popular restaurant has grown, expanding to 3 locations in the span of 2 years.
I think Korea it's such an underrated place to do business and to live as an expat or as a gyeoppo. And I think the opportunities are really abundant here.
Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
On a different note, President Park Geun-hye has praised the Korean Olympic team for their achievements at last month's Sochi Winter Games. At a luncheon attended by some 270 athletes and officials, including two-time Olympic speed skating champion Lee Sang-hwa and figure skating queen Kim Hyun-bin on Wednesday, President Park thanked the participants for their hard work during the sporting event. Now, she also asked attendees to mobilize efforts to bring about a successful outcome at the next Winter Olympic Games in Korea's resort town of Pyongyang. Korea was 13th in overall medal standings in Sochi with 3 gold, 3 silver, and 3 bronze medals. And some positive numbers on the nation's economic front. Korea's shipbuilding industry solidified its smooth start to the year, logging the most global orders in February for the 2nd consecutive month. UK-based Clarkson Research Service said Wednesday that Korean shipbuilders won orders accounting for nearly 1.4 million compensated gross tons last month, up 20% from the same month last year. Well, with that, Korean shipbuilders now control roughly 45% of the global market. And the pickup is attributed to Korean shipbuilding companies winning more contracts for larger, more expensive ships, such as container vessels and LNG-fueled ships. Meanwhile, Korea's foreign exchange reserves hit its record high in February, making it the 8th record-breaking month on the bounce. The nation's central bank said Wednesday that the figure peaked at above $350 billion as of the end of last month, up $3.4 billion from January. The Bank of Korea attributes the increase to the weak U.S. dollar that pushed up the value of non-dollar assets and rise in investment profits. Korea now has the 7th largest foreign reserves in the world. Now, this next story will not come as too big of a surprise for people living in the Korean capital, but a new study shows Seoul is among the world's top 20 most expensive cities in 2014. The London-based Economist Intelligence Unit's annual Worldwide Cost of Living survey found Seoul to be the 17th most expensive city to live in out of the 131 cities surveyed. Well, the survey is based on the average price of various goods and services, from food and public transport fees to private school tuition. Now, the most expensive city to live was in Singapore, followed by Paris and Oslo. Mumbai was ranked the world's cheapest city to live in. Meanwhile, maybe because of so, Korea's household savings grew at their slowest pace in 6 years in 2013. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that the amount of household deposits at banks came to roughly $470 billion at the end of last year, which is up about 6.6% from the previous year. Now, of that, the amount of savings deposits stood at around $430 billion, which is up 5.5% from a year earlier, which is the slowest pace in 6 years. Now, demand for deposits, which can be withdrawn any time, grew at their fastest pace in 12 years, jumping 20% in the same period to roughly $40 billion. Household credit came to $955 billion as of the end of 2013. Now, household credit also came in at $955 billion as of the end of 2013, up 6% from a year earlier. We now turn to the key business economic issues of the day with Dr. Kim Byung-ju, the head of KLNP Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Now, our focus today, market reactions to the crisis in Ukraine. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, we had financial market turmoil worldwide following this crisis in the Ukraine and the ongoing situation there yesterday, but it looks like the markets are calming down today, Tuesday, and in the West, and today in Korea.
Right. Since last night, looks like markets around the world are showing different signs here. So far, during the beginning of this week itself, yesterday and the day before yesterday, we saw all these major stock indicators all around the world falling down pretty much. And, you know, those whining investors who used to say they have given up their hope on Korean stock market, now they're saying they've given up their hope on emerging markets altogether because all these things were going down. Particularly Russian stock lost big time yesterday and the day before, but like a Monday, Tuesday. But what was happening is yesterday Russian stock gained some values back, and also European stocks, they had a rough time at the beginning of the week, but now they're recovering quite considerably here. And the U.S. stocks showed signs of considerable weakness at the beginning of the week, and now looks like the overall signs are showing upwards here. And usually the safe assets such as German government bonds was gaining big time around the time of weekend, but now it looks like it's stabilizing. And the yen's gaining value itself caused a lot of concerns in the minds of Japanese people there, but now it looks like it's stabilizing. Same story goes to the gold as well as oil reserve. When there is a heightening tension there, usually prices of gold and oil goes up, but it looks like they're all stabilizing. And Korean stocks actually, getting close to and going over 1970s mark itself was a good considerable sign. Towards the end of last week, we were around 1980, but we're not quite back to that point yet, but looks like the rebound here is also considerable.
Now, Dr. Kim, Putin's call for the return of Russian troops seems to be making a difference, of course. Now, it looks like he's walking on a very, very tight rope.
Right.
Your assessment?
Well, actually, a lot of analysts are saying now he's seeking his way out here. Of course, the optimistic analysts are saying that. And they're saying what Russia really wants is their control over Crimea. And looks like so far they got it. And what the Western world was concerned about was overall Ukraine. And the Ukraine area, what they were doing was they're doing the military exercise on the border. And then Putin made a call to pull out that military presence out of the area with the Ukraine while they keep their presence inside Crimea. So optimists seems to be taking as a kind of stabilizing. They're basically Putin getting what he wants, and the Western side kind of getting what they care about most. But I think we still need more time on this.
Now, as for the views on that situation there, the view seems divided here. The global financial market seems to be more optimistic, whereas some international security advisors are taking a very cautious approach to it.
Right, exactly. Different orientations having different views about the situation. Financial market seems to be believing that, as I said, Russia seems to have gotten what it really wants most, control over Crimea. And also Western pressure seems to have worked, they're saying. Judging from the Putin's call to pull their military presence back from the border areas itself, they said so both sides is reasonably happy about what they got so far. But however, the strategists who study and think about this international strategic issues, they're saying there are still causes and factors for concern here, because what will be happening at Crimea in the future will overall determine the future course here. And they say they cannot rule out confrontation, possibility of confrontation in Crimea yet, because Russia is adding their naval presence in the region. And also President Obama has clearly said Crimea is the place where they'll make their judgment upon.
Now, what are the options for the United States now?
There are different options available here, and particularly what's concerning in the minds of those people who care more about the peaceful resolution here is the internal reaction inside the United States, especially Republicans. They're saying big time, Obama once again made a mistake here. He's been too weak, too soft, and particularly John McCain is raising his voice saying that the U.S. is losing its credibility by showing no determination for action here, basically. So that kind of reaction inside Washington could actually cause certain change of direction from what we have been seeing so far, which is more of kind of like seeking a settlement and getting a dialogue done. But I think we need more time in Washington as well.
Now, more than anyone, the EU seems to be rethinking its dependence on Russian gas. Now, what can the European Union do about this?
Yeah, indeed. This is a big concern here, because this is not the first time that Russia is threatening to cut off their gas and oil supply to Europe. So Europeans are thinking hard here, basically, what needs to be done. What's happening is, in terms of natural gas, European Union members depend upon 30% of their consumption on Russian gas supply here. So that's a considerable dependency. And if you break down different countries, these Baltic states such as Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, for instance, 100% of their gas supply are dependent upon Russian supply. Germany alone, their natural gas, 40% dependent upon Russia, and 35% of their oil dependent upon Russia. So this is major Western economy and EU economy being dependent upon Russian supply and Russian goodwill indeed. And France is not an exception. 15% of their natural gas supply is dependent upon Russia. So they're actively thinking hard at this point based upon this experience this time and also experiences in the past. Now, what people are saying is EU is at a point to seek real alternative here, and alternative could be perhaps in the longer run. Well, they cannot make a quick change at this point, right? But in the longer run, they'll seek to get more of shale gas supply, perhaps from the United States or other sources, and seek other kind of environmentally friendly sources of energy supply, such as solar power and others, which are still costly at this point. And they'll work very hard on lowering their cost. And Russia, they're saying, is actually digging their own grave here because their economy really relies upon the natural resources exports here, and they're losing their credibility. So those people who are sympathetic about Russia are saying Russia is making a mistake.
Well, we'll have to see how Vladimir Putin makes his way out of this one, just like the way he's made things out of his way in previous incidents.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kim Byung-ju. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
And on that note, we have to leave you for this hour. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back here in less than 2 hours' time on Early Edition at 6.